Hello everybody and welcome back to another Path of Exile 1 video. Today we have a very special build to showcase on the channel, and that is going to be a league starter for the new patch 3.27 Keepers of the Flame. Now the build I have here for you is a build that is bad. Bad to the bone, that is. That's right, guys. I'm talking about BoneZone or Bone Shatter. We're going to be playing this skill on a Slayer. You can also play it on the Juggernaut, but we're going to pick the Duelist and the Slayer because it has a lot more damage early game, which is excellent for rushing the campaign and your Atlas progression. Now this is a build I've played before. Back then it used to be a lot stronger. Ever since the melee rework, the skill has kind of gotten forgotten about and been left behind. But this patch we're getting some massive buffs to Bone Shatter, which is going to make a decent skill even better. Now full disclaimer guys, there are better skills out there. Earth Shatter in particular seems to be really popular this time around. So if you're looking for an alternative, something that is a little bit off meta, something that is more true melee TM, then I think Bone Shatter is going to fit your needs nicely. Anyways, enough glazing about the skill, let's talk about its mechanics. Bone Shatter is a melee strike skill you unlock in Act 3 at level 28. It is a skill that only works with axes, maces, scepters, and staves. As I mentioned earlier, it's one of the last few true melee skills left in the game. You're going to be up close and personal with monsters. You're going to be standing there going toe-to-toe, trading blows with your enemies, so we're going to have to focus on both our defenses and offenses to make this character work. At first glance, the skill looks a lot like your default attack or heavy strike, but it has a couple of unique mechanics that makes it so much more. Let's start with the first mechanic, and that is Shockwave. If you stun an enemy with Bone Shatter, they will emit a shockwave to deal damage to nearby enemies. The longer the stun duration, the bigger the shockwave up to a certain maximum. This means that our clear speed scales considerably by investing into hard hits and heavy stuns. The next component of Bone Shatter is that it deals flat attack damage. In patch 3.25, the majority of attack skills had their flat damage component removed. Instead, they got a massive numerical buff to their percent effective damage. Bone Shatter did not get that buff. Instead, it retained its flat damage value. Now, you might be wondering why this is important. Flat damage scaling from your gem makes progression very smooth. Normally, you get all of your flat damage from weapons, but sometimes you can't find a weapon upgrade. When this happens, we can fall back onto our gem to provide flat damage from leveling it up instead. So Bone Shatter, compared to all the other attack skill, is going to have a very smooth scaling in the campaign and the early maps. The third and most important mechanic of Bone Shatter is the trauma mechanic. This is a stacking buff that your character gains when you use the skill and hit an enemy. The more stacks you have, the more damage you will deal, but you will also take damage when you attack based on the number of trauma stacks that you have. Trauma stacks have a duration and they can stack up indefinitely. So the only three things that determine how much trauma you can sustain is A, your damage mitigation. First of all, you need to be able to survive the incoming damage from the trauma. B is your attack speed. The faster you attack, the more stacks you will generate per second. And C is your increased skill effect duration. The higher this value, the longer each trauma stack lasts and the more you can have at any one given time. All of these mechanics combined makes Bone Shatter a formidable skill. You're going to be swinging your weapon, you're going to be causing shockwaves to clear enemies, and when you're fighting rares or bosses, you're going to stand still and ramp up those trauma stacks to deal some massive damage. Now in patch 3.27, Bone Shatter's trauma scaling is getting a massive buff. We're going from 2 to 4% more damage from trauma to 3 to 6% more damage per trauma. This is huge for our single target damage, which is actually where Bone Shatter suffers in the late game. Now just to recap guys, Bone Shatter requires that you build a lot of defense to mitigate that incoming trauma damage. We're going to be doing this by scaling armor, percent physical damage reduction. We're going to be using Fortify. We're going to be using Arctic Armor and other conditional abilities that makes us take less damage from hits while we are standing still. And we are going to be using Slayer Overleach and Life Recoup to gain back some of that HP we are losing. In the offensive department, we're going to be using Impale, Precise Technique, and all of the Slayer ascendancies that contribute to dealing more damage. It's a pretty simple and straightforward build, so let's get right into the details. Alright, so because this is a League Start guide, we're going to start by talking about how to level in the campaign. In the beach, you're going to have no choice but to use Double Strike with Chance to Bleed support. Once you get to Lionized Watch, I recommend switching over to Spectral Throw. You can continue using Chance to Bleed support, and later on you can add faster attacks or momentum to it if you want higher single target damage. If you want more clear, you can add lesser multiple projectiles or volley to it instead. That's going to shoot out 2 more projectiles with this skill, and it's going to let you hit more enemies with 1 attack. We're going to be using Spectral Throw all the way until the end of Act 3, where we swap to Bone Shatter. If you're wondering why this is, well, first of all, you actually cannot use Bone Shatter until you are level 28 and kill Gravicius. That's when you get the skill. But also, we're going to wait a little bit extra until our normal lab is done, so we have the right passives and support gems required to swap into Bone Shatter seamlessly. Remember, this is a melee strike skill. It's going to have a lot of things working against it when you first get it, and we need to make sure we give it the right passives and support gems so it can succeed and feel good to play. For our mobility skills, we're going to be using Frost Blink and Leap Slam. You actually get Frost Blink first, you can buy it from the vendor, but you can't use it until you get a source of intelligence on your character. I normally do this using the Lapis Amulet. I buy it off a vendor or find it on the ground, and later on you can actually path through some intelligence nodes so you don't have to rely on that amulet to get your intelligence fix. Later on we'll be getting Leap Slam. You can attach faster attacks and momentum to this to make it go a little bit faster. You can actually use both of these skills together. So you're going to Leap Slam first, and then you're going to Frost Blink after, and then Frost Blink will go on cooldown, and you're going to rinse and repeat. Now, while you're using Leap Slam, it's very important not to hold down the skill. There is a movement speed penalty if you just hold it down. But if you use it once every few seconds, it's going to go super fast. So you're going to Leap Slam, Frost Blink, walk a little, and then you're going to repeat that to get around the map. At some point along in Act 1, you're also going to pick up the Precision Aura. This is going to give you accuracy for your character, so you don't have to rely on swords and passives to hit enemies. Right, the rule of thumb here for Precision is to level it up once per act. So in Act 1, your Precision should be level 1. In Act 2, your Precision should be level 2. In Act 7, your Precision should be level 7. This is going to make sure that you're not reserving too much of your mana and that you have enough mana to use your other skills. With these out of the way, let's talk about your support gems for Bone Shatter when you get it at the end of Act 3. The first and most important gem you need to put on it is Fortify. This is going to give you a little bit more damage, and it's going to give you access to the Fortification defensive mechanic. When you attack, you're going to generate stacks of the Fortification buff. This stacks up to 20. For every stack, you're going to take 1 less % damage from hits. This is going to be instrumental in mitigating the damage we take from our trauma. Next, you're going to put in Ruthless Support. Ruthless Support makes it so every third hit does a massive amount of damage and has a guaranteed chance to stun. The stun will also have a minimum duration on non-unique monsters. This means you're going to be proccing those shockwaves for Bone Shatter with the Ruthless Support. It's going to make your clear feel so much better when you use this. For the fourth link, you're going to use the Close Combat Support. Now, if you're using this, it is required for you to be using an axe. It does not work with maces and staves. So if you have a stronger mace instead, you can substitute melee physical damage support for the time being and swap that to brutality later. But if you're using an axe like I did, Close Combat Support is going to make you deal more damage based on the distance you are from the enemy. Because Bone Shatter requires us to stand right next to the enemy, we're going to be getting the maximum amount of more damage from this skill. It's also going to make it so that our next travel skill we use has an action speed modifier, so it's going to make your Leap Slam move faster after every attack. That's basically all you need to know for your primary skills in the campaign. Everything else is covered in the POB. But to gloss over it super quickly, we're going to be using Arctic Armor for freeze immunity and to take less damage from physical and fire hits while stationary. We're going to be using Flesh and Stone so that we can deal more damage to enemies in Blood Stance or take less damage from enemies in Sand Stance. We're going to be using War Banner against unique enemies and bosses. That has to do with the Valor mechanic. You can read the tooltip. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's a conditional buff that increases your attack speed and damage dealt. We're also going to be using the Vulnerability Curse. This is something you can apply on tanky monsters when you need a single target damage boost. It's going to give you a chance to bleed, and it's going to make them take increased physical damage. Next, we're going to be using Molten Shell as a guard skill. This is going to proc to give us a defensive barrier to help us mitigate damage. And lastly, we're going to use the Blood Rage skill, which is going to give us some attack speed, life leech, and let us generate frenzy charges on kill. Now that is a lot of skills I just mentioned, but keep in mind that they are utility skills and not mandatory. You're only going to be able to use some of this in the campaign, but by the time you get into maps, you should have the sockets and socket currency required to slot all of them in. Make sure to use the POB loadouts to see what I did in the campaign and compare that to what you're doing if you decide to follow this guide. Some other general tips for the campaign is that in Act 1, make sure you get an iron ring, a rustic sash for a little bit of extra damage, a coral ring for a little bit of survivability, the lapis amulet for that intelligence to use some of your skills. You're going to want movement speed on your boots, you're going to want physical damage and attack speed on your weapon, and then you're going to focus on life, armor, and resistances everywhere else you can find it. Alright, resistances are probably the most important, then comes life, and then where you can, you're going to focus on getting some armor. The best place to get armor during the campaign is going to be your chest plate, so if you have no other modifiers on your chest, at least make sure that it's giving you a lot of armor. That's going to give us the mitigation we need to sustain our trauma stacks from Bone Shatter. Make sure to upgrade your flasks along the way. We want to run 2 life flasks, 1 mana flask, 1 quicksilver flask, and 1 granite flask. The mods on this don't really matter until the end game. Last but not least, if you are struggling to find gear upgrades, you can make your own weapon upgrade using the Rustic Sash recipe. You're going to trade in 1 rare Rustic Sash, 1 weapon of any kind, and 1 blacksmith whetstone. This is going to guarantee that you get a weapon with the physical damage modifier roll on it. And for all the other pieces, you can use the gambling mechanic in town. One of the NPCs in town is going to have the gambling option. Speak to them and you can purchase items from them. They will contain random modifiers and some of them might be better than the gear you have equipped. This does require quite a bit of gold, so early on you might not be able to use this feature, but as you progress through the campaign, you're going to get more gold and you're going to be able to gamble for more items. So let's jump right into the gearing section of the video. We're going to start by talking about what items I recommend you to use for white and yellow tier maps. If I don't mention any specific item here, check the POB. It's most likely a rare that follows the same affix priority that I just mentioned in the previous section. So what are we using for our uniques? You're going to start off by using a unique two-handed axe. This one is called Sinvictus Metal. It is a very inexpensive axe. It has an attack speed modifier. It has a modest amount of increased physical damage dealt. That's going to be more than enough damage to your white and yellow maps. But more importantly, it has the gain rampage mechanic. And rampage is a mechanic that is going to give you a kill counter. The more enemies you kill within a certain amount of time, the more that kill counter is going to go up. And then certain milestones, it's going to give your character some active benefits. The other cool thing about Rampage is that as the stacks continue to grow, you also get a passive bonus to your speed and damage. So the Sinvictus Metal, even though it's not the highest DPS weapon, when you combine it with the Rampage mechanic, it's going to carry you through those white and yellow maps. Next up, we want a unique for our glove slot. This is Tanu Ahi Unique Gloves. This is a fantastic pair of gloves for our build because it gives us attack speed, some much needed life leech, and it's going to have these 2 modifiers on it that give you a chance to proc adrenaline and onslaught whenever your unreserved life is topped off and leech is removed. If you're wondering why we didn't take our Slayer over Leech Ascendancy in Merciless Lab, that's because this gloves is incompatible with the Slayer over Leech mechanic. If your leech isn't removed, it doesn't proc adrenaline and onslaught, and then the whole reason for using these gloves is moot. So in our white and yellow maps, when you don't have Uber Lab done for your last Ascendancy, we can use Tanu Ahi, and then once you get your Uber Lab complete, you can swap to a rare pair of gloves, and I'll tell you what that's going to look like in the next part of the video. Oh, and quickly guys, Adrenaline, for those of you that don't know, is going to give you less damage taken, it's going to increase the damage you deal, and it's going to give you a substantial attack speed buff. Next up, we have the Carnage Heart Unique Amulet. This is a fantastic low-cost alternative for an endgame amulet. It's going to give you Life Leech, it's going to give you all elemental resist, it's going to give you attributes so you can continue to level up your dexterity and intelligence skill gems. It's also going to give you damage while leeching, and a little bit of an annoying mod that gives you extra gore. That tends to ruin your performance, so that's the only thing I don't like about this amulet. But if you have a decent PC, then you should be fine, and maybe you'll even like that extra gore effect. Last but not least is one of my favorite belts in the early endgame, and that is Belt of the Deceiver. This thing has life, this thing has increased global physical damage, it has elemental resistances, and it also intimidates nearby enemies while you have it equipped. Intimidate means they take 10% increased damage from attacks, and also there's a very useful modifier that makes you take less damage from critical hits. All in all, these Unix items should be very affordable when you get to maps, especially with asynchronous trade coming into the game. For all your other pieces, like I said, check POB, check the white maps and yellow maps configuration, and you can see what kind of modifiers we want to have on our gear. Like I already mentioned, it's going to be move speed on boots, you're going to want amethyst rings to get a little bit of chaos resist, you're going to want armor on your chest plate, and then you're going to want life and resistance nodes wherever else you can find them, okay? Alright, as you get into red maps, you're going to incrementally upgrade all of the items you've been using. So like I mentioned, you're going to swap out of the Tanu Ahis, you're going to get a rare pair of gloves with life, resists, armor. Alright, the most important upgrade you're going to have to do is to switch from Sinvictus Metal into a rare crafted axe. Go ahead and buy yourself a Despot axe, preferably eye level 83 or higher. You're going to use Deafening Essence of Contempt. This makes it so that your two-handed weapons are guaranteed to roll with the flat physical damage modifier. You're going to spam this or a shrieking version if you don't have enough money. You're going to use that on the Despot Axe until you roll increased physical damage or increased attack speed alongside it. Whichever mod you don't get, you're going to go craft using your bench craft in your hideout. So in this case, we got a axe with added flat physical damage from the essence, and then we rolled the suffix modifier of celebration, which gives us 27% increased attack speed. And then we had an open prefix, so we bench crafted increase physical damage, and that's how we make our axe for red maps, okay? An axe like this should be able to carry you well into T16s. It's not going to be the most damage, but I'll show you how to get an axe that does even more damage in the next part of the video. Alright, the other change I already mentioned is you're going to be swapping out Tanu Ahi for a rare pair of gloves. This is a good example of one. Obviously, the rolls here are a little bit higher than what you might have access to when you first enter red maps. Don't worry about the Eldritch Implicits. We're going to talk about that later when we get to the end game portion of the gearing section. Aside from those incremental upgrades, you're also going to want to get a 5 link on your chest or your axe. You should be using Impale at that point. So your 5 link would look like Bone Shatter, Fortify Support, Ruthless Support, Close Combat Support, and Impale Support, okay? So that's what the 5 link for your red map setup should be, and when you do that, you're also going to take some of these passives here. This is two-handed Impale Chance, and then there are some passives over here, which is giving you Impale Chance and attack speed, leading up to Impales you inflict last 1 additional hit. I'll explain the Impale mechanic a little bit later in the video when we're doing the passive skill tree section of the guide, okay? The next swap you're going to do is get rid of Belt of the Deceiver and use the Perseverance Belt. This belt has a little bit of armor. The evasion is wasted because we're an unwavering stance build that cannot evade. We get a little bit of increased maximum life, a little bit of cold resistance, although that roll varies and the higher roll ones are going to be a lot more expensive. More importantly, it's going to give you the You Have Onslaught while Fortified modifier. This is an incredibly useful modifier, especially when we swap out of Tanu Ahi. You're not going to get those procs anymore, so you're going to rely on your belt to give you Onslaught. We do not have any other source of adrenaline though, so that's just going to be a net loss for a character. But all the other upgrades you're making alongside this should make for a very robust build in your early red map part of your Atlas progression. Alright, now it's time for the fun part. We're going to talk about the final gear setup for the end game configuration on POB. There is a lot of changes here, so let's start with the safest changes first, because some of these upgrades, if you do in the wrong order, is going to negatively affect your build. So the first thing you can upgrade without having any penalty whatsoever is your axe. Right? To get an axe like this, we're going to use recombinators. You're going to get flat added physical damage on 1 magic axe. Then you're going to get hybrid physical damage with accuracy on a 2nd magic axe. Both of these are prefixes. You're going to recombine them until you get a 2 mod prefix rare like this. Then you're going to take that rare and you're going to multi-mod it, which is going to cost you 2 divines. Then you're going to slap some attack speed and increase physical damage with a chance to impale on hit onto this axe. So all in all, this is is a 5 mod axe. It is very straightforward to craft. The only thing that is not so cheap or inexpensive is getting this on a 30 quality base. This means that if your recombination fails, you might end up wasting a lot of money on buying base types that have 30% quality. Remember that quality on your weapons means that you're dealing up to 30% more damage on that weapon, okay? The other important thing about this axe is that you need 6 sockets on it. It doesn't need to be 6 linked, but there is a passive we are taking on the tree, Two-Hand Mastery. It gives you 10% increased armor per red socket on your main hand weapon. So this is our weapon. Make sure it has 6 red sockets on it. That's going to be 60% increased armor for your character. Very nice. Next thing you can upgrade right off the rip is your chest plate. I recommend using a royal plate base. This is the new armor base added in patch 3.25. It gives you a ton of armor just on the base armor, and then you're going to try to get armor rolls on it as well. You can see here I used an essence to craft it. Let's go find that essence real quick. I believe it was Deafening Essence of Dread, so I used a couple of this on this chest plate to craft it. It guarantees that you get flat armor modifier on it, and just keep spamming it until you get it alongside some modifiers you like. You can see here that you can actually get even more armor on this. I just settled for a bench crafted armor mod because it came alongside a chaos resist and additional physical damage reduction, which is very nice. This is what you're going to put your 6 link on. You can use an omen for that, or you can manually 6 link it. When you do get the 6 link, you are going to use brutality support. This is going to make it so that you deal more physical damage, but it comes at the cost of not being able to deal chaos damage and elemental damage. There is an awakened version for this gem, so if you have the currency for it, make sure to buy it. The next thing you're going to upgrade is your gloves and your boots. We already talked about incremental upgrades to your gloves. This one has resistances, attack speed, armor, and life, and then the boots here are going to have resistances, life, and movement speed, okay? And then we are going to upgrade our jewelry. So this is the tricky part because you may or may not be able to find a fractured base with accuracy rating like I did. Now, if you're wondering why we need so much accuracy on our character, it's because we're using the Precise Technique Keystone passive here. It says you gain 40% more attack damage if your accuracy rating is higher than your maximum life. But basically, if you check the offense section of your tooltip, I have 5,010 accuracy rating and 4,672 life. So we meet the condition to use Precise Technique. Okay, so if you can't get the accuracy rating on your amulet, try and get all of the other nodes instead. Try to get life, try to get resistances, and then you're going to do a benchcraft prefix on it so that non-channeling skills have minus to total mana cost. This is going to make the resource management of Bone Shatter sustainable without having to rely on a mana flask. Instead, we'll get a little bit of mana leech from one of our passives and be able to attack and just hold the button down as long as we have these mods on our jewelry, right? We have the same thing going on an amethyst ring base here. It has fractured accuracy, it has life. For your rings, you do want to get the damage taken recouped as life modifier. When you take damage from trauma, a percentage of that is going to be recovered over time. This is a very important stat to use, so make sure you get damage taken recouped as life, even if it means that you don't have resistances on your ring. You can make up for those resistances on other pieces of gear like your boots, your gloves, and your helm, okay? So damage taken recouped as life, most important stat on your ring, and then you're also going to benchcraft that prefix so that your skills cost less. If you have the currency for it, you can get Fertile Catalyst onto your jewelry. This is going to make it so that your life and mana modifiers on that ring is going to have 20% more effect. When combined with the non-channeling skills have minus the total mana cost modifier, you can move it from 7 to 8, and that does make a considerable difference. Now, as I was saying before, if you can't get the accuracy modifier on your jewelry, what you can do instead is I have some life nodes put over here. These are small life nodes. You can unspec out of them. You can spend it on accuracy nodes and elemental resists here instead. You can get accuracy mastery, and that should solve your accuracy and life problems for Precise Technique, okay? So that's what I recommend you do. If you can't get accuracy on your gear, you're just going to swap some passives instead and make sure you're still getting the conditional for Precise Technique. Right, so we've talked about jewelry. This is the next interesting part. We are trialing a unique item here called Winter Weave. Now, Winter Weave is a unique item that reverses the effect of Chill on you. Normally, Chill makes it so that your action speed is slowed, Winter Weave makes it so that your action speed is increased. Alright, this only works if you have the Eldritch Implicits that makes you take physical damage from hits taken as cold damage. If you're wondering how we proc that, trauma is a hit, trauma is physical damage. If you have a percentage of it being taken as cold, it's going to chill you when you hit yourself with Bone Shatter. Combine that with Winter Weave and you'll be getting a modest action speed boost, which will make your character deal more damage and feel a little bit more fluid while mapping. So earlier when I said that the order of operations is important, don't put in Winter Weave until you get percent physical damage taken as cold, and also don't take Precise Technique until you fix your accuracy problems, right? You can do that through the passives or the gear. The next thing we're doing is we're swapping out of Perseverance Unique Belt, and you're going to be using a Stygian Vise. This is from the Abyss mechanic. You're going to roll this using the Deafening Essence of Torment. Let's go find that super quick. It's called Deafening Essence of Torment, and when used on your belt, your boots, or your helmet, it's going to give you a chance to avoid being shocked. Now, this is really important for endgame Bone Shatter because there are a lot of sources that shock you, and when you're shocked, you take more damage. Sustaining your trauma is a little bit like walking a tightrope. Alright, if you don't get shock immunity in the endgame, you're very quickly going to be acquainted with the abbreviation KYS, and we don't want that for our character. So get that Deafening Essence of Torment, use it on your belt, try and get life and other resistances to roll alongside it, and then benchcraft something like Chaos and Fire Resist in this case, which is useful for your build. You'll notice that the Deafening Essence of Torment only solves half of our chance to avoid being shocked. Where are we going to get the remainder from? Or you can either use an Abyss Jewel that has a chance to avoid being shocked. Normally that ends up being around 40 to 50%, so the belt and jewel combo will get you shock avoidance, but also that's really hard to find with the Corrupted Blood cannot be inflicted on you implicit. So, those can be really expensive. So in this case, I've opted to use a Abyss Jewel that gives me Corrupted Blood immunity, and then I've used a Deafening Essence of Torment on my helmet to get the other 60% to avoid being shocked. Okay, so that's how you're going to get your shock avoidance in this character. So Deafening Essence of Torment on the belt, Deafening Essence of Torment on the helm, and then you're going to get resistances, life, armor, whatever you think is useful. Right, and the base type for the helmet in this case is also one of the new bases added to patch 3.25. It is the Giant Slayer helmet. Make sure to get one of those off of trade, or if you find it in your maps, hold on to it, and you can use it to craft your items. The item level for crafting these should be I-84 or above, and that's so you can roll the maximum tier for resistances. I think that basically covers all of the gear. We've already talked about all of this. I think Eldritch Implicits is the only thing left to talk about, so let's do that super quick. We're going to go into our currency tab, exotic tab. We're going to be using these lesser currencies to craft on our gear. Alright, the lesser Eldritch Ichor is from the Eater of Worlds. The lesser Eldritch Ember is from the Searing Exarch, okay? So you're going to use this on your gear to give them implicits. Alright, let's start with the gloves. The red orbs are going to give you non-ball strike skills, target one additional nearby enemy. And then the blue orbs are going to give you 5% chance to impale. This is important to get your impale cap alongside the impale chance from your axe. Alright, for our boots, we are using the red orbs to get action speed. We're using the blue orbs to get life regenerated per second per endurance charge. On our chestplate, we're using the blue orbs to get percentage of physical damage from hits taken as cold damage. And then for our red orbs, we want to get +1 to all maximum resistances. For our helmet, we're using red orbs to get physical damage taken recouped as life. And then we are using our blue orbs to get % physical damage from hits taken as cold damage. Alright, so that should cover all of your Eldritch Implicits on your gear. And as I already mentioned, we are using a Corrupted Blood immunity on our belt. That one is super useful because we have bleeding immunity from armor and evasion mastery, so we don't need to have that modifier on our flasks. We can instead get immunity to ignite and immunity to poison on our flasks. Alright, I'll show you guys the flasks later. And the only other thing that we've added to the build is a jewel. This is Watcher's Eye Prismatic Jewel. You're going to look for one that gives you 2 additional impale hits while using Pride. And then the second modifier in this case is a dead mod because I couldn't get one that was applicable. But what is going to be really good for our build is immunity to blind while you have the Precision Aura active. Alright, so make sure to grab that as your Watcher's Eye. We do not use Grace, we do not use Spell Suppression. That is a dead mod on this jewel. don't get baited by the POB. Alright, and when you have the endgame setup, it's also important to roll our flasks. These are eye level 85 flasks. We're using the Quicksilver flask for movement speed. We're using the Silver flask for onslaught. You don't have onslaught from your Perseverance unique belt anymore, so you need to get that from your flask. And then we are using the Granite flask for armor. Okay, the mobility and onslaught flask you are going to use when the charges become full. This is to help you clear your maps faster. And then the granite flask you're going to enchant so that it is used when you take a savage hit. Okay, this is to help us mitigate damage from trauma. Anytime your trauma stacks get too high, your granite flask is going to kick in. It's going to give you a little bit more armor, and it's going to allow you to sustain those stacks of trauma for just a little bit longer. Okay, now this is really nice when you're taking big hits from yourself or enemies and you need a little extra defensive layers to survive the next part of your hit, so you can leech your life back in that period of time. Alright, for our life flasks, these are improperly rolled. One of them should be for poison immunity and the other should be for ignite immunity. I recommend using the one that gives you instant recovery when on low life. Alright, time to talk about the passive skill tree. We're going to start off by taking all of these attack speed nodes leading into Art of the Gladiator. It makes it so you ignore all movement penalties from armor. Then you're going to go through life, armor, and evasion into Master of the Arena, and then you're going to grab these two-handed nodes over here for a little bit of early game damage. We're going to finish up Act 1 by going into the attack cost cluster here. Spirit of War is going to give you a little bit of mana leech. It's also going to reduce the mana cost of your attacks. Next, we're going to head towards the Marauder side of the tree. You're going to go and grab Unwavering Stance here. It's going to make your character stun immune, but you're not going to be able to evade enemy attacks. We don't use evasion gear or evasion, so this is not really a downside for our build. Then we're going to head into this direction here. I believe you grab some of these attack damage nodes for two-handed melee weapons over here. You can save a couple points pathing through this one node over here, or if you want to get ready for a little bit of Bone Shatter action, you can path through these two nodes here. It's going to give you a little bit of stun duration and stun threshold so that you proc your shockwaves a little bit faster. Alright, get kinetic impact. It's going to give you damage and chance to deal double damage, and then you're going to get two-hand mastery and get 40% increased damage with hits against rare and unique enemies. Then you're going to get Warrior's Blood over here, and then you're going to end Act 2 headed into Heart of the Warrior for a little bit of extra life before you fight the Vol Oversoul. Alright, in Act 3, we're going to go up over here, get Born to Fight for some damage, attack speed, and strength. Then you're going to get a little bit of elemental resistances from Diamond Skin. That's going to help you LE res cap by the time you're headed into Act 3 and 4. Then it's time to start prepping for Bone Shatter. So you're going to go down here, and then I believe we take this entire cluster over here that says melee damage and strike range leading up to Tribal Fury. Tribal Fury makes it so your melee strike skills splash to nearby enemies. Those splashed enemies can also proc the Bone Shatter Shockwave. That's how our clear on this character is so good. You're also going to spend your last point before you finish Act 3 on Attack Mastery to get non-vol strike skills strike one additional nearby enemy. We're going to go all the way back to our starting area here. We're going to have access to our Ascendancies, and we're going to take Bane of Legends so you deal more damage if you've killed recently, so that you reflect immune to physical damage, and so that you deal more damage with hits and ailments against unique enemies. Alright, with all of these passive points in place, you should be able to comfortably switch into Bone Shatter at the start of Act 4 or the end of Act 3. Alright, Act 4, we only have a few points to spend. You're going to get this strength node here leading up to Bloodless, which is going to give you life, as well as make it so enemies cannot leech life from you. Then you're going to spend the next few points on accuracy and versatility. That's going to give us some dexterity, movement speed, global accuracy, and intelligence, so we can continue to level up some of our skill gems that do not require strength. For Act 5, we need to get a little bit more tanky, so we're going to head over to the Juggernaut cluster here. It gives you armor and increased life, and then you're also going to spend a couple of points in this direction. That's going to set you up to get some of these nodes in Act 6. In Act 6, we're going to need a little bit of resistances to counter the cruel resistance penalty, so I recommend you get Cloth and Chain. It's going to give you evasion rating, armor, and all elemental resistances. You can also pick up Immune to Bleeding if equipped helmet has higher armor than evasion on the Armor and Evasion Mastery. That's going to make you bleed immune so that you can handle Act 7 a little bit better. There are a lot of monsters there that apply nasty bleeds. Then we're going to spend the rest of our points on these attack attack speed and damage nodes, leading up to Wrecking Ball, and then we're going to take the two-hand mastery here so that we have Ruthless Hits intimidate enemies for 4 seconds. We're going to start off Act 7 by getting Rage on melee hit, and then we're going to get the Vengeance node over here. That's going to make your Rage also give you a little bit of armor. We now need to focus on survivability, so you're going to get the Golem's Blood node here for increased life and life regeneration. Then we want to get our node over here. It's going to be armor leading up to Inexorable. Inexorable is a fantastic node for our class. It makes it so we have a chance to gain endurance charge when we are hit. Trauma damage does count as a hit, so when you use Bone Shatter, you will passively be generating and sustaining endurance charges on your build. More importantly, you get the 50% increased armor while stationary. You are considered stationary while attacking, so when you take damage from trauma, the 50% increased armor will be applied to you and you will mitigate that trauma just a little bit better with this node. Starting off Act 8, we want to get a little bit of damage and accuracy. By this time, you should be using Axis if you already haven't done so. You're going to take these Axe damage and accuracy nodes leading up to Feller of Foes. This is going to give you accuracy rating with Axis as well as a little bit of damage. You're going to get Axe Mastery and you are going to get 30% increased damage while in Blood Stance and 15% increased area of effect while in Sand Stance. Alright, remember we will be using Flesh and Stone. That is going to be our stance skill, so use Sand Stance if you want a little bit more area of effect and clear, and use Blood Stance if you want a little bit more single target damage. Right, then we need a little bit more defenses, so we're going to invest into Fortification. You have two options here. You can get Maximum Fortification leading up to Steadfast, or what I like to do is get Fortification Duration leading up to Steadfast, which is going to give us +3 to Maximum Fortification. If you're wondering why I picked Fortification Duration over +1 to Maximum Fortification, that's because a lot of times when there's eye phases on bosses, you're going to be unable to attack the enemy. If you're not attacking them, your fortification stacks are going to drop off, and that is more likely to get you killed than if you have 2 less fortification at any given time. So if you like consistency, if you like safety, go for the duration. Otherwise, you can just get the maximum fortification nodes here instead. Alright, then we're going to go ahead into the Act 9 portion of the campaign. You're going to get these Axe attack damage and attack speed nodes leading into Slaughter. Slaughter is going to give you gain 1 rage on hit with attacks, attack speed, and a little bit of damage. You can also get this Axe Mastery here that deals 10% more damage with hits and ailments against enemies that are on low life. That's going to be a buff to our single target damage. We're going to be heading into Act 10 by getting some Leech Life mechanics. So you get Life Leech over here, Life Leech Speed, and Hematophagy. This is going to increase the total amount of Life Leech you can have at any given time. You're also going to get Leech Mastery, and you're going to take 25% of damage taken recouped as life if Leech was removed by filling unreserved life recently. Now I realized I hadn't talked about Lab in Cruel and Merciless, so for our Cruel Lab we are going to go into Headsman. This is going to give you Culling Strike when the enemy is at 20% HP or lower. That's going to make your clear speed on those campaign bosses and tanky rares a lot better. Alright, for our Merciless Lab, we're going to get Impact. This is going to increase our global accuracy rating so we can hit monsters. It's going to give us AoE. It's going to give us some melee strike range so that Bone Shatter doesn't feel as awful to use. You're also going to get up to 15% more damage to enemies based on how close you are when you attack, and since we're a melee build, this should be giving you the full damage potential at all times. We are not taking Brutal Fervor, which is our Overleech mechanic, and that's because we want to use this Leech Mastery here for life recoup until we can get it on gear, and then we're also going to be using Tanu Ahi Unique Gloves, which is incompatible with that Slayer Overleech Ascendancy. As we head into white maps, we're going to be making a couple of changes. We're going to be speccing into Armor, Evasion, and Life over here and removing attack speed nodes. Use the respec function on Faustus, or use your Orb of Regret passive points that you got from doing the quests in the campaign. We're also going to want to spec out of Diamond Skin here, and now we'll have the points to get Soul of Steel instead. This is going to give you armor and elemental resistances, and more importantly, it's going to give you +1 to all maximum elemental resistances. That's how we're going to mitigate spell damage on this build. Otherwise, we do not have spell suppression, and we're going to be taking a lot of damage from spells, so make sure to get this node over here. And on the same note, we want to get a little bit more life, so go up here and you can get Barbarism. That's going to give you +1 to maximum fire resistances, a little bit of elemental resistances, as well as some increased life. If you are still struggling with elemental resist at this point, you can get this node over here that's going to give you +3, and you can also get this node over here leading into Prismatic Skin that's going to give you +5. And if things are really bad, you can spec back into Diamond Skin over here, although I do not recommend doing that because your points are better spent elsewhere. In yellow maps, we're going to need to have a little bit more survivability, so go ahead and take maximum lightning resistance here leading into Prismatic Skin. Make sure to take Protection Mastery and get Corrupted Blood cannot be inflicted on you. Then we're going to get our Endurance Charge over here, Life Regeneration per Endurance Charge, as well as Stamina, so we have a total of 4 Endurance Charges now before we do yellow maps. Alright, heading into red maps, there's going to be another massive change. You are no longer using Tanu Ahi, so take out your Leech Mastery. Instead, spend all of those points into Impale and Attack Speed Chance and get Brutal Skewering. This is going to make it so your Impales you inflict last 1 additional hit. I'm going to give you a little bit of a segment on how the Impale mechanic works right now. Okay, so let's very quickly talk about the Impale mechanic. This is assuming you have a 100% chance to Impale on hit, which you should if you're following the guide. The labels on the left side of this picture is going to be number of attacks that you do outgoing. This is basically how many times you've attacked and hit the enemy. Right, then we have number of Impale debuffs that you've applied. So every attack should apply 1 Impale debuff. Then we have the number of charges remaining. This is related to the number of charges on each Impale debuff. The default is 5, and every time that you attack an enemy that has an Impale debuff, it's going to subtract 1 charge from that Impale debuff. Lastly, we have the number of bonus hits. This is just a simplified way of saying how much bonus damage you are getting from the Impale mechanic. Alright, with the labels explained, let's get right into the numbers. Before you've attacked the enemy, the number of attacks you've done is 0, the number of Impale debuffs they have is 0, the number of charges those Impale debuffs have is also 0, and the number of bonus hits you've gotten is 0. Pretty self-explanatory. Right, what happens when you attack them for the very first time? You're going to apply the first Impale debuff. That debuff is going to have 5 charges, but because the enemy was not previously impaled, you're not going to recall any of those Impale charges. You're not going to get any bonus hits on your first attack. So what happens when you attack for a second time? You're going to apply a second Impale debuff. This Impale debuff is also going to have 5 charges, but since the enemy was already impaled, it's going to subtract 1 charge from the previous Impale debuff that the enemy had. Okay, so the very first Impale debuff we had now has 4 charges remaining. The newest one we just put on the enemy has 5 charges. You can add 5 plus 4. You're left with a total of 9 charges remaining on the enemy, and you get 1 bonus hit for all your trouble. So what happens when you attack for a third time? We're applying a third Impale debuff, but now the enemy had 2 Impale debuffs on them prior. You're getting 2 bonus hits, and each of those Impale debuffs are getting -1 to their total number of charges. So the first Impale debuff now has 3 charges remaining, the second Impale debuff has 4 charges remaining, and the newest one that you've just put on the enemy has 5 charges remaining. Right, we can do some quick maths. 3 plus 4 plus 5 is going to be 12 charges remaining on the enemy on the third hit. On the fourth hit, we're going to apply a 4th Impale debuff on the enemy. Since they've been impaled 3 times, you're going to get 3 bonus hits, and you're going to subtract -1 from each of the Impale debuffs prior. So our first Impale debuff is going to have 2 hits left, our second Impale debuff is going to have 3 hits left, our third Impale debuff is going to have 4 hits left, and our fourth Impale debuff is going to have 5 hits left. So quick math. 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5, you are left with 14 charges remaining on the enemy. On the 5th attack, we now have 5 Impale debuffs applied to the enemy. Alright, we have a total of 15 charges remaining, and we've gotten 4 bonus hits. Alright, I'm going to skip the math on this one, because the next hit is when it gets interesting. So on hit number 6, you'll notice that the numbers are the same. You have 5 Impale debuffs on the enemy, you have 15 charges remaining, and you have 5 bonus hits you are getting from the Impale mechanic. You can look at hit number 7, you're going to see the exact same thing. So what's happening here? We're staying at the same number because our Impale debuffs are expiring. When the charges on the Impale debuff hit 0, that Impale debuff is consumed and is no longer active. So the very first Impale debuff that we put that had 5 charges, on the 6th hit, that is gone down to 0, and then a new one replaces it. So you can see how the Impale mechanic is a ramping system that gives you more damage the longer you continue to attack the enemy up till a certain point. Alright, now that we understand how Impale works, make sure to get Impale Mastery. You want to take Impale damage dealt to enemies impaled by you, ignores enemy physical damage reduction. You also want to combine this with the Impale nodes from Harpooner. You're going to need this until you can Impale cap using affixes on your gear. So make sure to take this one right there. And I think there is another change for us to do somewhere in this section, because we're now swapping off of the Belt of the Deceiver unique belt. We have to find another source of Intimidate. We can do that using the Rage Mastery passive. Right, nearby enemies are intimidated while you have Rage. Right, and then I think this is something I forgot to do earlier. You want to switch Ruthless Hits Intimidate enemies for 4 seconds. You want to swap that into Armor Mastery, 10% increased armor per red socket on main hand weapon. Okay, this is going to give you a little bit more armor based on how many red sockets you have on your two-handed weapon. Alright, the last thing you can do is take this Life Mastery here, 15% increased maximum life if there are no life modifiers on equipped body armor. Just make sure you have no life regen, life recoup, or maximum life on your chest. It should have armor rolls and resistances anyways, so that makes it compatible with the Life Mastery node over here. So let's zoom all the way out and see how this looks. Don't forget to spend your Uber Lab Ascendancy on Brutal Fervor here. This is going to give you access to the Overleech mechanic and make you take less damage while you are leeching. Alright, so let's go ahead and apply all of these points. Alright, and that's it for the passive skill tree section for this video. Alright, if you want to know how to switch into the end game configuration in the POB, you're going to have to stay tuned until the league goes live. I'm going to follow it up with an update video, and we're going to do a switch from whatever I have in the POB up till red maps into the end game configuration with actual items we have available in the league. Right now I'm going to go into a little bit of an FAQ section. Here's where I talk about things that I think you guys are most likely going to ask, and also cover up some of the things that I missed in the previous sections of the video. So let's start with our anoint. What should you anoint on your amulet? To use this chest plate, we actually need a lot of strength. You can see here that it requires 293 strength. Without the amulet anoint, Blood Siphon, it's giving us life and it's giving us strength. We only have 273 strength, so that 20 strength from the amulet is giving us just enough strength to use our chest plate here. So that is really important in terms of the anoint. If you're getting strength from another modifier on your gear or from a jewel or something, right, you can anoint. I think skill duration, so exceptional performance here for Clear Amber Black is going to be what I would recommend. Skill duration is going to increase the duration of your trauma stacks. That's going to give you a higher ceiling for your single target damage, which is where the build typically suffers. Alright, next, what level should I have Precision? In the campaign, you're going to match Precision to have the same level as the act you are in. So if you're in Act 5, your Precision should be level 5. If you're in Act 9, your Precision should be level 9. When you get to maps, you're going to play it by ear. It'll be at least level 10, and you're going to increase it depending on how much accuracy your character needs. By the time you're in the end game and you have Precise Technique, you're probably going to need Precision on maximum level. Since our mana pool is too low to sustain this, you're going to run that alongside Arrogant Support, so you can reserve it on your life instead. Speaking of precision and accuracy, why is my character doing no damage? Make sure your accuracy is higher than your life. You can see here that with precision turned off, my accuracy rating is 3,472, and our DPS is also considerably lower. Let me put precision back on. Right now we have 5,000 accuracy. You see our DPS has gone up a lot. Alright, so just make sure you have your accuracy higher than your life, and if you are ever suddenly feeling like you don't deal damage in maps, make sure you don't run weird map modifiers that lower the effect of your auras. That's going to make your precision less effective. Don't run less accuracy. Don't run enfeeble. Don't run blind. All of those things combined are going to gut your accuracy. It's going to put you below the threshold for precise technique, and your damage is going to fall off a cliff. I guess that answers the question of what map modifiers I should avoid. I will include a regex for your maps in the description below, as well as in the notes of the POB, so keep an eye out on that. You can copy and paste that into your stash tab search bar. Alright, that's going to make it so that only the maps you can run are highlighted, and the ones that are not will be grayed out. Alright, next question. What is this socket in our glove slot? That is for your Enlighten. This is a League Starter build, so I will not expect you to have Enlighten, so I have not structured it around having Enlightened, okay? It is for our Pride, our Arctic Armor, and our Flesh and Stone. It's going to reduce the amount of mana we are reserving when we socket that in. Let's see if I can turn my auras back on super quick. So we'll have Arctic Armor. Alright, you'll have this much mana left without Enlighten. If you use Enlighten, maybe you'll have closer to about 40% of your mana unreserved, and that should help you sustain the mana cost of Bone Shatter without having to use a mana flask. Some other questions. Bandits. What should we do? In Act 2 and in the campaign, you're going to help Alira. This is so you get elemental resistances from helping her. Once you get to maps, maybe in red maps in the endgame config, you're going to respec the bandits. You're going to kill all so you get a passive point instead. At that point, you can use elemental resistances from your gear to make up for the elemental resistances you lost. Speaking of which, what Pantheon should we run? For your major, you want to run Soul of Solaris. This is going to make it so that you take less damage from physical damage if there's only one nearby enemy. This is fantastic for sustaining your trauma and tanking hits from bosses. For your miner, I recommend getting Soul of Gruskul. This makes it so you take additional physical damage reduction for each hit you've taken recently, up to a maximum of 5. Because Bone Shatter and Trauma is considered a hit, this is always going to be up as long as you're attacking, so this is where we're getting a lot of mitigation. Next question, is there any skill gems you should leave at level 1? Yes, you should leave all intelligent skill gems on this build, so all blue gems at level 1. They don't provide anything useful for us as they level up. Frostblink is not really going to give us a lot of distance traveled, and the automation support is just to trigger Blood Rage. You don't need that maxed up or qualityed or anything, okay? Speaking of quality, if you had to pick one gem to quality first, what would that be? That is a no-brainer. It's going to be Bone Shatter. Bone Shatter gives you +1 more damage per trauma when you quality it. This is going to be massive for our damage, and you're going to want to quality that ASAP. Maybe even run Merciless Lab a couple times so you can have that qualityed up before you start mapping. You'll have a much smoother experience. Next question, why not use Bone Shatter of Complex Trauma? This is a build I've played before in the past. It is quite strong. It has a higher floor but a lower ceiling. It's usually run alongside builds that don't attack that fast, things like bleed builds. Those are fantastic for Bone Shatter of Complex Trauma, but right now I just kind of want to play regular Bone Shatter instead and scale attack speed. That's going to have a much higher ceiling. You're going to see later on, once we invest heavily into this build, just how high we can get the trauma stacks up and how much damage we can deal as a result of doing that. Next question, there are a lot of buttons on your bars to press. I don't want to press that many buttons. Well, a lot of these are optional. Frostblink is a secondary mobility skill. Leap Slam is your primary one. You technically don't need Frostblink, but I like using both because it makes your character faster. Next is vulnerability. There are ways to automate curses on your build. They require a bit of investment, usually influenced items or gear pieces from Delve. Specifically, the ring will have curses you can apply on hit. If you have that in your character, you no longer need to press a button for vulnerability. Right, Flesh and Stone is another option for you to kind of leave on and forget. If you want to take less damage at all times, leave it on Sand Stance. If you want to deal more damage at all times, leave it on Blood Stance, alright? Min-maxing by alternating between the stances is only if you want to. The aura is going to be effective no matter what stance you are in, so if you don't want to press an extra button, pick the stance that most complements your playstyle, leave it on that, and remove it off your bar. Right, with all that said, that should only leave Bone Shatter, Leap Slam, and War Banner on your bars. You do actually need to press the War Banner button. It is a massive bonus to your single target damage whenever it is up. Alright, so at the end of the day, this is really a one-button build with War Banner for utility and Leap Slam for mobility. Alright, the next question is related to Atlas strategies. What do I recommend you run with this build? I think Betrayal and Delve is going to be what I'm going to be running. This build has a lot of armor, and therefore it is good for a low to mid-level Delve. So something like depth 250 to 300 is going to be really easy to do even on the red map setup. And Betrayal is a really good mechanic to run on this build because they are considered unique monsters and they're going to be susceptible to all the damage modifiers from our Ascendancy as a Slayer. And on top of that, if you can get a bunch of the Betrayal NPCs to spawn on you, it's going to allow you to shotgun them with BoneZone Venn Diagram of Death, meaning you're going to get through those encounters super fast and super safely with all the mitigation you have for your character. And the last question is, I don't like this build, what do I do? You can try rerolling into Rutu's Smite Slayer from patch 3.26. The build should still be functional. You can look up his channel, you can look up his guides. He's actually a really good build creator, although you might need an Amulet of Cat Speak to understand what he's saying at times. And with that said, that brings us to the end of the FAQ and the end of this video. If you enjoyed watching this, consider giving it a like, consider subscribing for more PoE1 content, and I'm going to take this chance to plug a couple of my other videos. If you didn't like this build but like the style in which I made this guide, consider checking out 2 of my guides from patch 3.26. We have a league starter for the Blade Storm Champion. That one was a lot of fun to play, and we have a high budget version for the Blight of Contagion Occultist. I expect that's going to be extremely strong for the new Breach mechanic in the Keepers of the Flame League. If you're looking for currency guides, I recommend checking out my Divination Scarab of the Cloister Farm video. I also did a guide on farming essences in yellow tier maps, and quite some time ago I did a guide on Alva Incursion Temple running. That is going to be a really good way for you to make money, especially with asynchronous trade now in the game. And last but not least, if you're looking for a beginner-friendly walkthrough, I did do a 2-stone run on the Bone Shatter Juggernaut. It plays very similar to this character, it's just a little bit more tanky and does a lot less damage, but it's a very comfortable build, and I've heard that people really enjoy watching it on a second monitor while they play along on their main character. So that's all I have for the Shameless self-promo, guys. Thank you again so much for watching. I'll see you soon with a new video, and happy Halloween!